Hello, this is Michael Hexter, and this is episode 5 of my video cast, Politics 2100. And this is the first one I'm trying without a blog post as the basis, my personal blog post of my own, as the basis of the chat or my discussion here today. But it's a topic that I've thought about a lot, and I might very well write in the future something about it. But it's always occurred to me that I didn't want to give the topic or the people in the topic of my discussion that much attention, that much care, that much analysis that a written piece would demand. And so I've decided to make it a part of a video cast, and I might very well write about it in the future. So the topic, the title that I'm going to create for this video is going to be episode 5, the new anti-progressive ultra, in quotation marks, left or ... or right. I mean, it's very... the title, it could change, but in any case, I want to talk about, there are certain individuals that are being discussed as what I'm calling the anti-progressive ultra-right, or the new anti-progressive ultra-right, ultra-left, I'm sorry, or right, that are being discussed as, they have problematic personalities, or they have bad politics, they have bad morals, and that all those things might be true. But I want to bring in a concept from the history of left-wing thought to put some kind of theory behind it, or at least try to elevate it into some abstractions that we can then look at what these individuals are doing and see that it's a pattern that is maybe inevitable, or maybe it's something that can be avoided. But anyway, so I'm discussing it in a different way than it's being discussed online by multiple people, and it's not very significant. So if you're someone who's not deeply involved in politics or in left politics, you might find this, a trivial matter, but it is actually, there are some important insights that I think apply even to people who are maybe people in your life that are like this, or that if for whatever reason, and it rings a bell for you for other reasons that I don't know about. So anyway, so this is the group of people I'm calling ultra left are, there's a well, let me back up. So since the in the United States, since the Bernie Sanders campaign of 2016, in which I participated as a volunteer, and I also volunteered for his 2020 campaign, but that was much more limited because of the pandemic. But in any case, that unleashed a whole series of organizations and then also candidates that use small dollar donations to create a legislative presence for the left in the Democratic Party, even though Sanders himself is an independent, but he caucuses with the Democrats. So it created a group of people groups like Justice Democrats that emerged, Our Revolution that emerged out of Sanders' campaign, and then Brand New Congress. There are other organizations that started to fight money in politics, by big money in politics, by supporting candidates who pledged not to take corporate PAC money, and were supported by grassroots people. And so you see the results of some of these candidates like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Cori Bush, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Jamal Bowman, Mondaire Jones to some extent, though he wasn't formally part of those groupings. But you see an organized parliamentary left, okay, in parliamentary being in a legislature. So in the United States. But you also have had a reaction to that. So while previous to that there were maybe only Sanders and maybe John Conyers, there were a few legislators that could be identified as somewhat or left. Or Paul Wellstone, unfortunately, passed away all too soon. So in any case, this grouping has created a reaction online, or there have been people who have been disputing that these people are a good development. In other words, so there's some, and among them, I mean, one character. I mean, this is the name that you will be able to search under to find documentation of what I'm saying more. But anyway, this guy named Jimmy Dore, D-O-R-E, and there's also, to some extent, Glenn Greenwald, who's much better known than Jimmy Dore in wider circles, though Glenn Greenwald is a different person than Jimmy Dore, but they've become allied in some way or another. And there are others who, to some degree, Kyle Kulinski, but in any case, these are people who have soured in one way or another on the project of putting progressive legislators into seats, or trying to get them in as Democrats into Congress, into the Senate, into state legislatures, into other even the mayor of Buffalo, was just elected, who's a Democratic Socialist. So, or the mayor-elect of Buffalo, New York. But this ultra-left has what I'm calling ultra-left, or has basically been criticizing these legislators like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to some degree also Bernie Sanders, as being sellouts in some form or another. So, and this, there was a very specific event early last year, late in 2019, and then, late in 20. So it was just after the 2020 election. I'm sorry. So there was an effort to. So it was in late 2020, after the results of the election, and there was an idea that started by Jimmy Dore called "Force the Vote." So the idea was that the larger now progressive, the larger Justice Democrats, the approximately 10 representatives who are somewhere in the squad or squad adjacent would, or even just the squad, which is now about 5 or 6, would withhold their votes for Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House in exchange to get a floor vote for Medicare for All. So this was an idea that initially I was saying, well, if it will work, it will work. So I was wanting those representatives to try to extract all the concessions they could from Nancy Pelosi or from the Democratic leadership in exchange for their vote for her for Speaker. And I am deeply critical of Nancy Pelosi. I think that she's a Democrat in name only, I could even say, even though she's a lifelong Democrat. But she she is a extremely wealthy woman and just is allied. She's one of the, as I was describing, the good cops. One of the corporate. She's a corporate Democrat who serves the donor class. She is a member of the donor class, or could be a member of the donor class if she weren't in office, because of her and her husband's joint holdings. So anyway, the to withhold, and she is also has lots of bad ideas about budgeting. She believes in the Peterson philosophy of deficit hysteria, or his campaign of deficit hysteria. She thinks that she believes in pay-fors, and that you need to pay-go is actually a rule that she imposed on the previous Congress that fortunately has not been imposed on this Congress, which requires a ledger being kept for all programs being proposed, that they would actually, the revenue would need to come in order for the spending to go out in exactly that timing when the government really doesn't need to do that, and that neutralizes much of the value of government in the economy and in our society more generally. So anyway, so she is chock-a-block full of bad ideas, and she's against Medicare for all. So anyway, so this idea of pressuring the squad to pressure Pelosi, I thought was, had merit, and I was wanting them to do something, and I was tweeting at them, and at that time, Jimmy Dore is someone who I've had interaction with with him on Twitter, that I didn't appreciate how he dealt with our interaction, and he was already, in my mind, someone who is very problematic for a number of reasons. But I thought, well, maybe he's redeeming himself. I'm not someone who is going to say, well, someone is uniformly bad if they redeem themselves, if they do something good, or if whatever it is that they're, there's nothing essentially. He may not be an essentially bad person, just someone who's misunderstood. I may have misunderstood him. So, but in any case, he immediately turned the force the vote strategy was not accepted by the squad and by AOC, and by, they didn't enact it. So they didn't withhold their votes for Pelosi in exchange for this floor vote for Medicare for all. They said that they got concessions through negotiations that we weren't party to, unfortunately, and it's really the whole process of the Speaker of the House is an extremely powerful position, and ideally we would have much more transparency. I mean, we should enact legislation that makes the vote for the Speaker transparent, and also makes the conditions of holding the speakership much more rigorous. Because, for instance, I felt in helping elect or trying to help, volunteering to elect a number of progressive members of Congress, some of whom succeeded, some of whom didn't, I felt like a lot of my efforts were wasted, because essentially the business end of our Congress is what the Speaker does, and the Speaker can essentially control the caucus once appointed, once elected, unless they're, for whatever reason, thrown out. So so essentially you're voting, even though you're voting for someone else, whoever becomes Speaker becomes your voice in Congress. And that Nancy Pelosi, 98 or 95 times out of 100 does not speak for me. But but again, there was also the alternative of McCarthy, who I would even, I would say would 100 out of 100 wouldn't speak for me. So, anyway, but there was claims, but what happened is that what I'm calling this new anti-progressive ultra-left, or right, decided that they were the fraud squad. So in other words, that they took the fact that no Medicare for all vote was forced via the squads, whatever they were doing, or withholding their vote. In other words, that would for Pelosi in exchange for this idea, that they took that as a meaning that the entire project, that they were all the same as a Republican or the same as a corporate Democrat. In other words, that they were worthless and useless because they didn't follow Jimmy Dore's idea of forcing the vote. And so, I didn't think that was fair, and I think that I didn't know enough, and unfortunately we still don't know enough about what was possible and what isn't possible given the current composition of the Congress. So I can't judge to the degree to which they failed to use their power. Okay. And Cenk Uygur, who I agree with maybe 90%, 85% of the time in terms of his political commentary, and spent 25 years, studying politics, almost full time, and is one of the founders of the Justice Democrats, among other things, and an online commentator, the Young Turks. So I will put the link in the description box to the Young Turks if you're not aware of them, but I imagine you might be. But anyways, he's the founder of the Young Turks. And so anyway, Cenk Uygur also faulted them for not holding out in one of the packages a little bit later on for a $15 minimum wage. He said that he thinks that was their failure. In other words, so they failed. So Uygur disagreed with Dore and thought Dore was being, wasn't on. He was being too categorical. I mean, I'm not really sure. There's a lot of history between them. Dore used to be on the Young Turks, and then he split off from them. And since then, there's been lots of bad blood between those two. So, and unfortunately, our politics is such that, media is very, very important in politics. I will talk about that in other videos. Media, and so the left media is important for left politics. So what happens in left media, so Dore is a media figure, Uygur is a media figure, Kulinski, who I mentioned earlier, is also a media figure. Also, Kulinski was involved in the founding of the Justice Democrats as well. So, and media overall is a huge political actor. So anyway, I do not have enough information about what is possible with the given composition of Congress and what are the pressures they are under. I imagine this is the time, by the way, of the insurrection and of insurrection is the wrong word, the riot, the coup attempt by the radical right on the Capitol, and the threats to the physical safety of Congress. And so I would imagine, and the area where I'm agreeing more with Pelosi than I disagree is in some of her handling of, she seems genuinely interested in getting to the bottom of who planned and who collaborated with the January 6th attack on the Capitol. And I hope she follows through. I hope she presses her colleagues, presses the Justice Department, presses any number of people to get the full picture, and also to, if someone needs to be charged or with crimes, that they will be charged with crimes and prosecuted. So, anyway, so I think that both Uyghur and Dore underestimate the degree to which this squad needed to, in some sense, create some compromises, more compromises than perhaps they would have wanted in some other area, or in some imagined world where the attack on the Capitol didn't exist. That they needed to, some sense, show more solidarity, so to speak, with their speaker and with the Democratic caucus, which is standing in its very inefficient and, I think, cowardly way. I think they need to be much braver. I mean, that not everybody's being cowardly. Some people are being brave. So I don't want to say but they need to, the leadership of the Democratic Party overall, from Biden down to Pelosi and to Schumer, need to be stronger in their prosecution of elite criminals. So not just Trump, not just who's now out of office conveniently, but just this is a long-standing problem in Washington, that white-collar criminals, that not just Washington, but in the legal system more generally, the rich and powerful get away with crimes. And so in this case, the potential crime of trying to end American democracy, or in various forms, needs to be charged and prosecuted if it happened, or if someone is not, something happened, but whoever is the responsible parties need to be held responsible. And so, and the Democrats have not been at all eager to do that. So, but in any case, the squad and the left, the small left contingent within Congress, was under some pressure to, they are looking at a number of factors in their support or non-support for Pelosi and in that time period. So anyway, extremely tense, and it's still extremely tense time. So factoring in all these different things, I suppose, is hard. So, but we don't understand all those different layers. But anyway, this ultra left that I'm describing definitely doesn't understand the complexities of being a legislator, and doesn't want to know. They treat these legislators as being essentially all powerful, or that they could be a firebrand at every moment in their holding of office, and that they would get more results if they were that way. Now, I think they should be more firebrands than they are. So in that way, I am not entirely disagreeing with this analysis. So even though I don't like some of the people in terms of their approach, and I think that they draw wrong conclusions from their analysis, to go so far as to say these people are frauds. In other words, I don't think Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is a fraud. I don't think Cori Bush is a fraud. I don't think Jamal Bowman is a fraud. And far from it. I think they are sincere people trying to do their best, okay? And they are also new to Congress, and so they have still been learning the ropes in some form or another. So, but I would wish that it would be more transparent to, though I think, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is as transparent as any legislator has been in recent memory, if not, ever, partly because of new technology like social media about occupying a seat in Congress and all the duties and activities that she does. Certainly, I mean, many of which are obviously also show her in a positive light, but she's also relatively truthful, I think, about a whole host of things related to her office. So anyway, so there's a community. So I've been focusing on this force the vote controversy, and that has continued to fester with these. For instance, Cori Bush, who just heroically helped extend the eviction moratorium, and someone who I've supported, and I do support, and I supported her, and in when she announced that she was going to sleep outside the Capitol, but that and that's being held against. So in other words, they've been a journalist affiliated with Max Blumenthal is, I think, also part of this ultra left. So he's a name that some people know. Sidney Blumenthal is his father, but he has his own career as a journalist and commentator. But anyway, and that gets me to this sort of second group. So there's ultra leftism is something that has a long history, and is also, and when I use the word ultra left, it is a judgment that I am, saying. In other words, it's not, to be ultra left is not a good thing, and people who are who I consider to be ultra left do not identify themselves usually as ultra left. So because it means beyond left, it means ultra being beyond. That it's a judgment that says, well, you're going too far. You're off on your own. In fact, Lenin wrote I've never been a Leninist, but he wrote some pieces that are very important to read, at least if you're interested in the history of the left. And he wrote something called left-wing communism and infantile disorder. So left-wing communism is the same idea, that left-wing is in quotation marks. So and that kind of attitude, an infantile disorder is something that I might have some background in psychology, and I have some training in psychology. I think there is some childishness going on in some of the demands being placed on these representatives, that they magically do things when they have still very little power. Now, I still believe in pressuring them, and I think that pressuring them with demands is important, but to then entirely dismiss them if they do not submit to your vision of what should happen, you should at least think about, well, you should understand in great detail why it is that they are deciding not to do that. Even though you might decide they're wrong and you continue to press them, dismissing them out of hand, and anyway, to try to the idea is that these often journalists and often media figures like Blumenthal and like Dore, is that they are attempting to smear these Congress people, or throw mud at them for not being the exactly perfect avatars of their values, including values that I share too. So some of the values that they propound, I also think are good values, so are good things. But they believe that if someone is not immediately, if some congressperson or some political figure is not immediately on their side 100%, or speaking out exactly to the issues that they value that they are a total sellout, a total, and that they should be, mocked or roundly criticized, or just be told that they're Pelosi's stooges, or that they're even that there's no difference between them and Republicans, or anyway. So I've gone into great detail about the force the vote thing, but there's a more general and longer standing community on the left in the United States, which is an anti-imperialist left, and I am also an anti-imperialist. But I disagree often with the contemporary messaging strategy of people who identify, or of journalists who identify themselves as anti-imperialists. And so this is an important issue. So that is different than and older than the issue, and not unrelated to the personality of these online, the Jimmy Dore, let's say, or that issue of the force to vote. This is but they are also they're not unrelated either, but anyway, it's been very hard in U.S. politics for any politician to question the imperialist system of the United States and the militarism of the United States. So we have very few politicians who have really, I don't think there's been any national politician who really has been good on, or at least one, I guess Dennis Kucinich. I mean, I've forgotten some of his positions, so I don't really, but let's say practically zero is the number of U.S. politicians on a national stage who openly criticize U.S. imperialism and also Israeli imperialism, Israeli apartheid, and which is one of the, and I will make more videos about the weaponization of I'm Jewish, or I have a Jewish origin, and I'm not particularly religious, but I see my heritage and my history of my people being weaponized to hurt good people, and also to further the interests of not only the U.S. imperialist project, but also the Israeli apartheid, obviously most Israeli apartheid and his oppression of the Palestinian people, and also expropriation, or genocide essentially, or of the Palestine, at least robbery, organized state robbery of the Palestinian homeland from the Palestinians. So, so the anti-imperialist journalists who focus, and the people who have been focusing most on anti-imperialism, which was a big, sometimes the left in the United States has only been about anti-imperialism starting in the 1960s, and even in the 1990s and the 2000s, against the Iraq War was one of the catalyzing events in American politics for some parts of the left. Unfortunately, it didn't have, the anti-Iraq War movement did not have very strong institutional impact. It did not create candidates. It created candidates that later, arguably Barack Obama was elected because he said he was against the Iraq War. But that wasn't he didn't have a full-scale critique of American imperialism at all. And he was immediately, when he got into office, he did lots of things that supported and reinforced the American imperialist project. Not though in some ways he was better than some of the other presidents, both before and after him, and he was but it's not, there's nothing, not a principled anti-imperialist stance. He didn't represent an principled anti-imperialist stance. So anyway, so a lot of the legacy and of the left currently, people who've been around since the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, and are still on the left, not the newest left, have commitments about anti-imperialism, or but they don't have much institutional within parliament, within government. They're not laws. There are not many laws that they've ever enacted, or they're not, because they haven't had representatives who have proposed laws that restrict U.S. Imperial, the U.S. imperial project. So anyway, so this unfortunately, being on the so far on the outside, and so has not prepared these people. I mean, I'm being generous, and I say that when I say this, not prepare these people to deal with people who are on the inside in the parliaments of the United States, who can have some say about, not all the say, but some say about U.S. military policy and U.S. Foreign policy. And but it's very hard. There's, unfortunately, these people need to be elected in areas of the country, some of whom, many people in the United States, are tired of imperial wars, and but there's not a big media infrastructure that supports a politician going out on a limb and criticizing U.S. militarism and in a deep and profound way, and creating an alternative vision of U.S. security that is not imperialist. None of this is. No one has done this. No one has done the legwork for a policymaker to be able to make policy that doesn't just say, well, no, let's get rid of it. Let's just do reverse of what we're doing. And I mean, sometimes doing the reverse of what we're doing would be a very good thing in many instances, in the area of foreign policy, in the area of military policy, but we still would need a vision of security, of what is the world going to look like if we are no longer the imperialist hegemon, and voluntarily. And so and Bernie Sanders has been in Congress a long time, and it's not been his specialty at all. And so these people coming from the outside are essentially, the journalists and whatever are saying, no one is as good as us on these issues. These people in Congress are not as good as us. We're better than them. They fall flat every time when they open their mouths and when they on these issues, because they're not correct on U.S. imperialism. And I sometimes agree. I think that but are they totally without any merit in this area, or are they people who are to be dismissed? And my answer is no. They are much more likely to condition U.S. aid to Israel on human rights abuses, or rather than unconditional aid. There's a whole bunch of, beside Israel, there's a bunch of other foreign policy issues that where the people who are currently elected to Congress would do better than the existing policy. So, or are likely to do better, or they could be pressured to do better. Okay, and anyway, this group of anti-imperialist observers from the left, who have basically been living decades, sometimes without any representatives who are anywhere close to what they to their positions and their views of the world, are applying their all or nothing framework to these people who have just arrived in Congress and have a bunch of different things to do, including potentially saving U.S. democracy, if possible. So I'm going on very long on this video, but and I wasn't intending to go on this long. I didn't think it would be now 40 minutes or something, but and I'm still not getting to, I think, the heart of the issue, but just to sort of to preview what I think is the heart of the issue and maybe continue on another day. The ultra-leftism or this view, all or nothing view of what these politicians are doing or not doing, looks very, unfortunately, like Vladimir Lenin, wrote a long time ago in 1920, infantile. It looks like they are now. He wrote that for reasons political reasons that some of which I probably wouldn't support, given the trajectory of the Soviet Union and its after 1920, and especially after Lenin's death and with Stalin and so forth and so on. And there's a whole critique of Marxism and Marxism-Leninism that I am writing, but basically this critique of this essentially throwing mud. It's not a critique, is something that you could potentially use. It has some constructive criticism in it, but it's criticisms and it's smearing and it's saying, nah, you're bad. If you're not with me, you're against me. If you're not, and it starts to look like it starts to feed into cynicism, and cynicism is a right-wing attitude. So that's where the ... left, ultra-left ... or right is in the title of this video, this now long video. And we see this with the way that people like Max Blumenthal and Jimmy Dore are focused, and there's a whole history there. There are other people. There are many. I would say there are 12, 15 public intellectuals of various levels, or public intellectuals being journalists mostly, or commentators mostly, who of varying ages, who fall into this category, who are, I guess you would say, mostly anti-neocon. Okay, so the neocons were, this video is going to go too long. Anyway, let me just stop and just say that they are flirting with, and the ultra right, with the neo-fascist right, like for instance. The video cut out on me, so for instance Tucker Carlson, and so there's a blending from the left, from the far left, or the supposedly far left. It could be actually a pseudo left. Some people are calling them pseudo left now, and the far right. So there's starting to be a red-brown coalition, and there are complexities here that I can't go into in this particular video, but I'll continue in other videos. Anyway, so this is a beginning of this discussion of a group that I don't think should be that important in our politics, and they're not very numerous, but they have a strong presence online, and they do ally themselves with ideals that I share partly, and that's many young people share and that people on the left share. They ally themselves, and then they turn those ideals into a destructive political strategy. So anyway, episode 5, I'm going to cut it here, and then we will continue in the next video. So thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this content, please like or subscribe, and also comment below. And I hope we can continue the discussion in future videos or in a comment section. Anyway, see you then.